right, welcome to Science Pub. My name is Tristan Mentry, and I'm the program's coordinator at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History and Sea Center. And again, welcome to Science Pub. As summer is approaching, we have some fantastic exhibits and events coming up, both virtually and on site. Next week, we have Dinosaur Evolution Conversations with a Curator. Also, we are excited that our Butterflies Alive exhibit opens May 29th. So please check out our calendar for more information, and that link will be in the chat. We also want to remind you to support your favorite local business, like our favorite Dargan's Irish Pub. All right, so without further ado, our speaker tonight is Chris Wilmers. Chris is a professor of wildlife conservation at the University of California, Santa Cruz. He has been studying large carnivores such as mountain lions, African lions, leopards, and bears for over 20 years, trying to understand how humans impact their behavior, ecology, populations, and conservation. Locally, Chris and his team have been studying mountain lions in the Santa Cruz Mountains for the past 12 years. Their research is illuminating many aspects of the secretive world these animals inhabit that were previously unknown to science, as well as identifying critical habitat and land use practices essential for their continued survival. Welcome, Chris.
Great, thank you, Tristan. Am I live or spotlighted or whatever the lingo is?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first, thank you very much, Tristan, for inviting me. It's a great honor and pleasure to get to speak to this audience tonight. I wish it were in person, but very happy to do it by Zoom. So I'm going to speak to you all about the research we've been doing on mountain lions in the Santa Cruz Mountains of California for the last 14 years or so. And hopefully answer, a lot of your questions about mountain lion biology and their conservation and management in the state. So before I begin, I always just want to make sure to thank everybody involved, because I fear running out of time and then not thanking everyone. So this is really a collaborative effort that has been conducted by a number of people, including graduate students and postdocs in my labs over the years, a number of amazing collaborators, a number of great field biologists who have been, busy out in the field collecting all the data, houndsmen who help us capture the mountain lions to put tracking collars on them. We even had a pilot who worked with us for a number of years to help us track animals from the air, a great illustrator, and dozens at this point, really hundreds of undergraduate volunteers who've helped on the project, and then a number of funders and amazing photographers who've helped capture these animals. So these are the critters that we study in my lab. We're basically interested in how land use change is influencing these large carnivores across the globe, including leopards and lions in Africa and mountain lions here in our backyards in California. And these pictures, I think, do a great job of illustrating how we imagine and really want these animals to look like in the wild, these majestic creatures living in beautiful, untrampled environments. And yet more and more, this is sort of the reality that these animals face. Above, you have a leopard in Mumbai in India. On the lower left, you have a African lion on the outskirts of Nairobi in Kenya. And then on the lower right, you have the famous mountain lion P22 in the outskirts of LA. And so more and more, human development is encroaching on their habitats and making it more and more challenging for these species to eke out a living. And so our research is really trying to understand how these kinds of human development and land use change influence their behavior, their physiology, and ultimately their populations and conservation. So when we think about land use change, ecologists often call this habitat fragmentation. So the building, when we develop buildings and roads and raise trees to plant agriculture, we end up taking what might have been a continuous environment for these animals and sort of chopping it up into blocks, which is called fragmentation. And this is our study area, the Santa Cruz Mountains, seen from the air. Hopefully you can see my arrow. Up in the upper left, you see San Francisco, the Silicon Valley, Pacific Ocean, and this big block of green here to the east of Highway 101 is called the Santa Cruz Mountains, and this is where we do our work. But you can see the Santa Cruz Mountains is now kind of cut off by a bunch of development from the neighboring mountain range to the east, and it's sort of out of the picture here, but the neighboring mountain range to the south. And so this is what we think of as landscape scale habitat fragmentation. But then if you zoom in on the Santa Cruz Mountains itself, you see images like this, where this is the city of Santa Cruz and the campus of UCSC behind it, where I'm sitting right now. And you see UCSC is sort of embedded in this matrix of, forest and grassland and now sort of partially developed landscape. And this is the kind of landscape these animals are dealing with. We have mountain lions that walk through UCSC campus. Occasionally they even come into downtown Santa Cruz. And so, you have development, you have busy roads. This is Highway 17 that bisects the Santa Cruz Mountains. And so, we want to try to understand how we can mitigate these kinds of development, how we can develop in wiser ways that allow these species to thrive alongside of us. And that's what our research is all about. So how do we do that? Well, actually, first, let me get into some of the problems with fragmentation. Well, first it can injure animals. So this is 16N. He was a mountain lion in our study, and he got hit and probably dragged on the road on Highway 17, and it removed about a square foot of skin from his hind rump. And he stopped moving for a couple of weeks, and miraculously he sort of recovered and didn't quite grow back the fur, but at least grew back the skin and managed to survive for another year or two. Here's a deer, which has similarly been, probably dragged from by a car that we saw on our remote camera traps. And then, of course, most animals that get hit by a car aren't so lucky to survive. And end up as roadkill. So there's also more pernicious effects of fragmentation, and that is that it brings a lot of potential for disease, and in particular with small, medium to large carnivores, we're seeing a lot of mange, which is a skin disease, which is brought on, we think, by weakened immune systems, which are weakened in the first place by the use of rodenticides or rat poisons, which are pretty widespread in the environment, agricultural fields, golf courses, supermarkets, housing developments are all using rodenticides. And they're very effective at killing rodents, but the problem is that once they kill the rodents, then or when they don't kill the rodent immediately, the rodent walks around kind of in a haze, and then they're eaten by coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions, and then that weakens their immune system. They become susceptible to mange. This is a coyote about 20 feet from, or 200 feet from my house. Here's a bobcat with mange on the UCS campus. So we're seeing more and more of that kind of thing. And then at the landscape scale, the fragmentation can lead to genetic defects. So if animals are no longer able to get from one mountain range to the next, then you can start getting inbreeding, which leads to low genetic diversity, which then leads to a slew of problems that have been famously sort of documented in Florida panthers, where there's, at one point there were less than 100 individuals. And they saw, heart deformities, low sperm counts, malformed sperm, cryptocortism, which is where testicles fail to descend. And we're now actually, researchers in the LA area are starting to see this with mountain lions down there, and possibly in other parts of the state that we're only starting to look for now. So, we'd like to remedy this and prevent it from happening in the first place, right? So to, study these animals, they have, huge home ranges. A male mountain lion in our area might have a home range of 150 square miles. And so, they're kind of like needles in a haystack. And you can do a lot with cameras, which we use a lot of. This is a remotely captured mountain lion on camera. But to get some of the sort of more detailed information about their movements and their populations, you need to catch them and put on a tracking collar, which I'll show you the data from in a minute. And so the way we do that is we do a lot of reconnaissance, looking at maps, hiking roads, driving roads, setting up cameras. And then once we get an idea of how animals are using the landscape, then we'll use a couple tools to try to catch them. The first is using hound dogs. And so hound dogs is sort of taking advantage of this ecological or evolutionary relationship that's developed between wolves and mountain lions, where mountain lions are great at climbing trees to escape a wolf predator that would otherwise kill them. And so we chase them with dogs. The mountain lion climbs the tree. The dog lets us know that the animal's in the tree. And then we come along and the animals, looking like this up in the tree. Sometimes they go to sleep with the dogs underneath them, barking like mad. In any case, we come and we anesthetize them, and then we put a tracking collar on them, take some measurements, take some blood for DNA, and let them go. And the collar has, a number of devices on it. It's got a GPS to look at their movement. It's got an accelerometer so that we can sort of use the collar as a Fitbit to look at their energy consumption. And it also allows us to, monitor when these animals get in trouble, and if they do die, determine what the cause of death was. So people often ask us, what do mountain lions or pumas eat? I like to call them pumas, or in particular puma, which is the way the British pronounce it. But they go by lots of names: mountain lions, cougars, catamounts, panthers. Mountain lions have the largest latitudinal range of any species. They go from Southeast Alaska all the way to Patagonia, the southern end of Chile. And so, by living across such a large latitudinal range, they've picked up lots of common names, but it's all the same animal. And people often ask me, what do they eat? And well, the main answer to that question is, well, they really like to eat deer, and they're an ambush predator. So they sneak up on the animals and, chase them down over very short distances, and then, kill them with a bite to the neck or nose. And so they mostly eat big deer, but they also eat some smaller things. I get lots of game camera footage that people send me by email, and this is a great security footage of mountain lion chasing a coyote. I think that coyote probably got away. Here's one of mountain lion taking on an opossum, and that is one fierce opossum, I've got to say. And then here's a raccoon.
Holy!
That was a raccoon that this guy
Holy.
just came up his back porch.
Now mine caught a
grabbing it
raccoon.
right in front of him. So we get a little bit more quantitative. This is what mountain lion kills look like by species. From these GPS collars, we can look for places where mountain lions have spent a few hours without moving. And then we know that they were either sleeping there or feeding there. And by going and visiting hundreds or at this point thousands of these places, we can find the remains of their prey and figure out what they eat. And if you look at it by number, about 76% of what they're eating are deer. And then the other ones that sort of measure a bit are raccoons and house cats. If you look at it by biomass, how much meat do these animals get from each of these kills, then it's, the story is almost all deer, right? House cats and raccoons make up, decent percentage of their diet by number, but by biomass, it's very small. So we can think of a mountain lion as basically a deer predator. Now, they do also like to kill goats and sheep. And this is a big problem for mountain lions because they don't do a lot of it, because when they do it, they often, will get depredated by the landowner, who is can get a permit from California Department of Fish and Wildlife to remove the animal. Although that has changed in our area from the Santa Cruz Mountains south of the Mexican border along the coast. Mountain lions have been provisionally listed here as a threatened species, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. So another question people ask me is, do pumas fear humans? Well, maybe not, because this is my office building here in the yellow circle. And here's a GPS location of this radio-collared male, 36M. And here I am posing with the deer that he killed with my office building in the background. And here he is coming back again to feed the next night. And so, based on this, you might say, not only do they not fear us, but, because I put a collar around his neck, he's coming to stalk me. But, I'm a scientist and not prone to making quick judgments. And so we decided we would look at this experimentally. And so what we did is we set up an experiment at mountain lion kills where we would put a camera, video camera, attached to an MP3 player, attached to a speaker. And when the mountain lion would come back to feed, it would hear either the sound of frogs, which was our control sound, or people talking conversationally like I am right now. And we'd see what they did. And so here's an example of that. So here's the frogs. You can see not much reaction. That's a deer carcass that he's feeding on that's been covered with leaves and duff to keep the smell and insects off of it. Okay, and now the human trial.
This because the grand jury rendered a correct verdict.
Okay, so you can see he jets the second he hears human voices, and you might recognize that voice as being Rush Limbaugh. We tested whether mountain lions were afraid of just partisans on the right or also partisans on the left and nonpartisans. It turns out that mountain lions are totally nonpartisan in their fear of humans. And this is what the data look like. This is the percentage of trials where animals fled upon hearing either frogs or humans. And you can see that they almost never flee from frogs, but they almost always flee from humans. And then there's an ecological impact of that, in that they're less likely, they're less likely to return. And if they do return, they return later after hearing human sounds than after hearing frog sounds. And that has an important impact on them, in that they feed for about half as much time after having heard humans at their kill than after having heard frogs. And so if they're getting less food from kills that are influenced by people, then you might think that they have to make up for that food by killing more. And indeed, that's exactly what we found happen. We looked at hundreds of kills that mountain lions had made in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And we compared kills that were made close to people to kills that were made far from people. So, this is an example of what a kill site close to someone's house might look like. And here's one, in the middle of the woods far away from homes. And what you can see from these panels on the bottom is that when they're close to people, they only feed in the wee hours of the night, and then they move away during the day and rest, a few hundred meters away. When they kill far away from people, they just kind of stay close to their carcass the whole time, feeding intermittently throughout the day and night. So the impact of that is that female mountain lions, have to increase their kill rate from around 50 to around 75 deer per year as the density of houses in their home ranges increases. Okay, so that's the impact of fear on mountain lions around kills, but we wanted to make this a little bit broader and ask, well, what happens if there's people in the forest? How do mountain lions react to us then? And so we took 2 square kilometer patches of forest that were off limits to humans, and were in areas that we knew that mountain lions like to frequent, and we collared every mountain lion that we could that overlapped these 2 areas, and we put 25 speakers spread out by 200 meters throughout these 1 kilometer grids. And for a month, we played the sounds of people and then the sounds of frogs for another month. And the other one, we did it in the reverse direction. And we also had cameras to measure what other species in the system were doing. And we also took a bunch of measurements of small mammals by setting traps that allow us to look at how small mammals change their space use and during the time that we were playing those treatments. So what did we find? Well, mountain lions, during the control, when the frogs were playing, this is sort of a typical track you'd see. This is the grid. Each one of these black things is a speaker, and the blue is our control. When the frogs are playing, you see the mountain lion just sort of moves through the grid, doesn't seem to care. But when the humans are playing, what you typically see is that the mountain lions would sort of get close and then bounce off of it and kind of move around the area with humans. Occasionally they did go through the grid, but if they went through the grid, they kind of split the distance between speakers, and they'd move more slowly or more cautiously. And so this is the data presented in a statistical way, where we see that during the human trials, mountain lions are more likely to avoid the grid and move more cautiously. And so then we asked, well, what happens to all the smaller carnivores in the system, like bobcats and skunks and critters like that? And we had 2 ideas. One was that, well, they might be very happy with no mountain lions, because mountain lions do like to kill those animals. But they might also be scared of people, because people are the largest predator by far of medium and large carnivores. And so it turns out that it's the latter, that all these species are sort of deathly afraid of humans. Bobcats become more nocturnal. Skunks just reduce their activity levels altogether. And possums reduce their foraging activity. And so then if these smaller carnivores are all avoiding the forest as well, then we thought, well, how are rodents going to behave? And we thought, well, this would be pretty good for rodents. And indeed, that's what we found. Deer mice almost doubled their home ranges. And then deer mice and wood rats became foraged much more intensely when the carnivores were gone. And so a sort of visual way to sum this up is that when you have no people in the forest, then you've got this sort of carnivore rich environment where the rodents lay low. And conversely, when you have people in the forest, even if they're just talking to each other and not shooting at things, then the carnivores make themselves scarce, and the rodents kind of have a field day and become much more, really increase their home range sizes. Okay, so people often also ask me, how does this fear influence where these animals go? So if you sort of take a coarse look at where mountain lions occur, this is looking at the Santa Cruz Mountains with Santa Cruz down here and San Jose up here. Each color is a different animal, and each point represents one 4-hour GPS location. It kind of looks like mountain lions are just about everywhere. But if you zoom in, what you find is that they're not just about everywhere. They really like cover. So they'll move through wooded areas, even if there's some homes surrounding them. But you almost never find them out in the grassland exposed in the open, where you could see them, where they'd be vulnerable to, getting killed by dogs or humans or wolves. No more wolves here anymore, but there once might have been. But this is the UCSC campus. You see that, where it's forested, you're going to have mountain lions. And I should point out that, each one of these dots doesn't sort of represent a mountain lion right now. This is one animal over the course of 2 or 3 years. So this represents maybe 3 or 4 visits to the UCSC campus over a 3-year period. So it's not like mountain lions are a sort of common occurrence on the Santa Cruz campus, especially where the buildings are, but they do use it and they do go through those areas. Here's another example of a mountain lion moving through heavily urbanized area adjacent to some open space. And, at first I saw this and I thought, oh, let's zoom in. I bet we'll see some creek that it's following. But no, there's no creek here. This animal's just moving through people's backyards. And in fact, it spent the night here. It hit this 15-foot high concrete wall on the edge of Highway 85 and couldn't go any further. And so it spent the next day hanging out here. Either it was under this person's boat or underneath this tree. Spent the whole day there and then wandered back to open space the next night. And, nobody ever reported seeing it. Here's another example. This is my caller arriving from Germany to Santa Cruz. And then we go out and we put it on this young male who at the time was still dependent on his mother. This was sort of his, natal home range. And then at about, a year and a half, he disperses from his mom and he takes this walkabout through the Santa Cruz Mountains and he gets closer to Silicon Valley and crosses Highway 280 into the Los Altos Hills. Apparently wasn't urban enough there for him. And so he keeps going until he gets to downtown Mountain View. And this is sort of ends up at this corner at about 5:45 a.m. and decides it's getting a little light for my comfort. So then he goes and he hangs out behind a bush by this apartment complex for the day. And that's the bush, and that mountain lion is sitting behind that bush for a whole day until about 6 o'clock at night, where he makes a break for it. And he was spotted by some people who reported him to the police. Police respond. There's helicopters in the air looking for this animal. Eventually they get him trapped in this covered parking garage, which conveniently had steel grates to it that they could keep him in. And so this is the animal, and the Mountain View police were, as you might imagine, being in Silicon Valley, they're quite media savvy, so they instantly start tweeting about it. Possible mountain lion sighting, seen with a radio type collar around its neck, do not approach, more info as we have it. And then they reached out to us, and rather than emailing or picking up a phone, they tweeted at us, which had never happened to me before. And it's a good thing that they found my number, because I don't think I would have ever responded to the tweet until maybe months later. In any case, then they show their media savvy again, and they create a hashtag MV Puma. And so then Julia Vasquez writes, sheltered in place, and we have a hashtag, exciting night in the Silicon Valley. And then Nancy writes, helicopter looking for mountain lion in our neighborhood. So it was kind of fun. From Twitter, you could start to get a feeling for what was going on there. And this was the scene when we arrived. And this happened right after California had changed the law to sort of mandate local law enforcement to non-lethally remove mountain lions if they could from urban areas. Before the law was passed, unfortunately, this animal would have probably just been shot. But after the law was passed, that there was this, encouragement to non-lethally remove them. But initially, they had, no idea how to do this. So we helped out on a couple of those, and now local wardens and stuff have been trained up on how to do this. But so that's why we sort of got involved. And this is the scene when we showed up. Mountain lion spotted in Mountain View, Mountain PD with guns drawn near Rengsdorf in California. Track writes, MV Puma cornered beneath a car in an apartment complex. That's my complex, and it's probably my car. And here's the mountain lion cowering below this minivan. And wouldn't you know it, but this is a Silicon Valley mountain lion, and all of a sudden he pops up on Twitter and writes, this game warden guy has a weird looking gun. Why do you think I'm under the car? You guys, they've got me surrounded. And so, we were able to safely anesthetize him and get him loaded up into our truck. And we had like this 4-car siren escort through the mountains to, back to open space where we released him. And then wouldn't you know it, that he's back on Twitter the next day, and he says, glad to be back out in the open space in soft hills. That city concrete is murder on the pause. Humans call me 46M, but my friends call me Rory. And then my favorite tweet was Sam Wheatley, who writes, we should use the MV Puma hashtag to organize a block party. This is the most contact I've ever had with my neighbors. Okay, so lots of fun in the Silicon Valley for 46M, but it illustrates this problem that these mountain lions are having a hard time accessing nearby habitat that they need to do so that they can make their living, they can give birth to offspring, they can exchange genes among adjacent populations. And that's becoming a problem. And this is a genetic view of mountain lions in California that we worked with a team out of the University of Wyoming led by Kyle Gustafson and Holly Ernest to map the genetic structure of mountain lions across the Santa Cruz Mountains. And what you can see is that, these different colors are indicating populations that are more similar to each other than adjacent colors. And, you really shouldn't see different colors like this in places like California. Like, there's no reason why mountain lions in the Central Coast Central North Coast shouldn't be able to breed with animals in the Central Coast. There's no natural barrier that would prevent them, but there are man-made barriers. There's these highways and subdevelopments and other factors which prevent animals from interbreeding. And that's becoming a problem. These animals are becoming somewhat inbred. And we can see that by looking at what's called the effective population size, NE. And this is there's some complexity to this thing, but you can basically think of NE as the size of the breeding population. And there's, it's well known that, you need about 50 animals in the short term and 500 in the long term to prevent the deleterious effects of inbreeding and the extinction of the population. And so we can see these numbers are, especially for the area from Central Coast north all the way to the Mexican border, these numbers are really small. And if we don't do something to improve that situation, we're going to lose these mountain lions eventually. And so to do that, John Benson and others in LA showed that we basically need about one new migrant per generation coming in to each of these populations from an inundation population. How do you do that? Well, the best way to do that is to improve the connectivity among these populations. And so that's something that we've been working on in the Santa Cruz Mountains. In the Santa Cruz Mountains, there's sort of three important spots. There's this one with the circle around it, which has Highway 17 running through it. And then there's this spot here that connects Santa Cruz Mountains to the Diablo Range to the east and through what's called the Coyote Valley. And then there's this spot in the south, which connects to the Gabilan Range. And we've been identifying the important connectivity zones there. And here in Santa Cruz Mountains, we've identified two. And we've been working with Caltrans and the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County and Post and mid-regional open space, and to protect land on both sides of the highway, and to then also build tunnels underneath the highway to allow mountain lions to safely go through. And Caltrans is going to break ground on this lower circle, hopefully by the end of this year. And hopefully in the next few years, we'll break ground on this one to really restore that connectivity. If we look at the eastern connection to the Gabilan Range, we thought we would, figure out how mountain lions are moving through there by, collaring a bunch of these young males, and these young males would show us, how they're moving through the Santa Cruz Mountains and how they're getting across to other mountain ranges. But, it turns out that they'll go all the way up as far as they can to San Francisco. They'll get to right around the zoo and they'll usually turn back. Occasionally, animals, not ones that we've had collared, but others have made it up to Presidio and Golden Gate Park. And they'll go all the way down to the southern edge. They'll go all the way to the coast, and they'll make it most of the way to the Coyote Valley. But, the habitat and the connectivity is just not right. And so this is zooming into that eastern connection. And we really wanted to understand better, what's going on in this zone here. And so we didn't have enough samples of mountain lions to really understand this, because mountain lions are hard to come by. So to sort of investigate the plumbing of this area for wildlife connectivity, we turned to little cousin of the mountain lions, the bobcat, who are a little bit more, they're much denser on the population, on the landscape, and we thought they could give us an idea for how the plumbing is working for wildlife movement. And so we did the same thing. We collared these guys with little tracking collars, and basically took a location every time they moved. And so what this map is showing is it's showing that valley, and two big roads are this gray line, which is the Monterey highway, and this white line, which is the Highway 101. And these orange tracks are the track of about 20 different bobcats that use this area. And so what you can see is that there's this really dramatic pinch point right here, where bobcats are just able to get across this road at this one little location. And at that one little location, we're also finding a lot of roadkill. And so this is sort of showing that, we need to punch a few more holes across the highway to encourage, more animal movement. This is the Highway 101, which is actually a bigger highway than this one, but has more connectivity because there are bridges and culverts underneath the road that animals are already successfully using. And then in the southern part of the Santa Cruz Mountains, similar problem where we had a mountain lion come all the way right to the Highway 101, right where it says 156, although it's also Highway 101, and his collar stopped working. And so what we think happened is he got hit by a car and killed the collar, killed him. And so once again, we have this nice evidence of this not working for mountain lions. We wanted to understand it a bit better, so we colored a bunch of bobcats in this area and one fox south of the road. And basically these animals can't get across the Highway 101. So again, working with the Land Trust, they've been protecting habitat on both sides of the highway. And then the next thing to do is for Caltrans to, increase the connectivity here, either by putting in a tunnel or a land bridge. And in this case, I think it'll probably be a tunnel. So that's all I have for you guys tonight. But I expect there to be some questions, and I'm happy to stick around for a while and answer many questions. So thank you very much. And please visit us at our website if you like. We've got a tracker that shows you where the animals are going, and we try to update our publications and stuff like that. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. That was awesome. We do have questions for you, so we'll jump right into the Q&A portion. We have one from Sophia. How big are lions? How big are these animals that we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. Females tend to be pretty steadily 80, 85 pounds. I think we had a female as heavy as 93 and as small as about 75, but they almost always come in right around 85 pounds. The males, on the other hand, they can vary quite a bit. Full-grown males weigh anywhere between 110 and 150.
Awesome. Thank you. I just want to say, for those of you who are raising your hands, we're not going to call on anybody, so make sure you use the Q&A box to get those questions answered. The next one is from Peter, and he is asking about a wildlife corridor planned in the Agora Hills, the Thousand Oaks area. And he says, won't mountain lions, coyotes, and other predators simply hang out at these bypasses and kill all the deer that are drawn to the bypasses?
Yeah, that's a great question. They probably won't. These animals have lots of business to do besides eating. They have to patrol their ranges. If you're patrolling a 150-mile square home range and you're trying to keep other adjacent individuals out, yes, you need to eat, but you're not going to stay in one place and wait for prey there. You're going to go somewhere else. And also, just waiting at one spot's not going to be a great strategy, because once you kill one deer there, well, first of all, the deer aren't necessarily attracted to crossing sites. They might cross occasionally, but there's not like attractants luring them in there. So I wouldn't worry about that. What can happen is that you do have to use directional fencing along the highways to funnel the animals into the land bridge or tunnel, rather than having them cross over the surface of the road. And coyotes will occasionally use that to run a deer into the fence as a way to kill it. But it's this won't be the first land bridge. There's many of these that exist now. And so it's a fairly rare event. Got
it. Well, we have lots of questions. So this next one is from David. does the collar come off on its own, or do you have to physically remove it?
Yeah, great question. So the collars have a blow-off mechanism where I probably shouldn't use blow-off as like the language. It's not like if you were holding it and the blow-off and you wouldn't even feel it. But we can remotely drop the collar. So we can send a signal to the collar and poof, it pops off the animal. So we can either do it that way, or we can put it on a calendar so that, on January 3rd, 2022, it drops off.
Got it. Okay, here's another one. Are there any plans to relocate young males to different territories? I'm guessing to help with that inbreeding situation and the fragmentation.
No, not currently. We'd like to, if we're catching an animal in an urban area, we like to put it in a nearby, natural area where it would have likely come from. If you're talking about sort of moving animals among mountain ranges, we'd rather solve this problem with land use by, either maintaining connectivity or restoring it, rather than moving animals around, because moving animals around might seem like a simple solution once, but you've got to keep doing it year after year after year after year in perpetuity. And, there's no guarantee that future generations will continue to want to do that. And it's quite expensive, and it is politically much more contentious than maintaining connectivity.
Yeah, that makes sense. People are really interested about like face-to-face encounters, and they're asking, if you see a mountain lion, how do you act respectfully around it? What do you do if a mountain lion approaches you? We're getting a lot of these types of questions.
Yeah, so the basic sort of mountain lion 101 in terms of like, what do you do if you encounter a mountain lion? The general rule of thumb is, you act big, put your hands in the air, make a lot of noise. If you have small children, bring them close to you, pick them up. That's the best thing you can do. There is a little bit of nuance to that that's not very helpful. And that is that there was a study done out of UC Davis a few years ago where they looked at all the encounters with mountain lions. And, they looked at what did the people do and, what was the outcome. And for the people who turned and ran, they were less likely to get attacked. But if they did get attacked, they were more likely to die. So, I think I just go back to the conventional wisdom of just stand there, look big. If you were with someone slower than you, yeah, sure, run.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Next question is from Doreen. This is an awesome question. How did the California wildfires impact these territories and animals?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're working with a sort of team across California, LA, San Diego, around here, Marin, Northern California, Sierra, and putting our data together and looking at how, mountain lions respond to burn areas. And we don't really have an answer to that yet, but just sort of some basic thoughts are that, when a chaparral type environment gets burnt and, you basically have no cover left anymore, that it's burnt to the ground and there's nothing there except for little baby plants, you're not going to have mountain lions living in that kind of country. When a redwood forest or ponderosa pine forest or something like that burns, and it just burns the understory, but the trees are still there, the structure is still there, mountain lions are probably going to come back into that area much more quickly, as deer do. If you're thinking about the fire itself and whether a mountain lion, dies during the fire or not, then that's really going to depend on, the scale of the fire and how quickly it burns through. The Big Basin fire that we had, CZU fire that we had this year, it burned 50,000 acres in 24 hours. That might have been fast enough that a mountain lion couldn't have gotten out of there. So, I would imagine on these massive fires that burn very quickly, some animals do die. But I think most of the time animals are going to be able to get out of the fire area and be okay.
Well, that's good. All right, a few more here. This is great. Another great one. Where do we go from here? What frontiers in urban wildlife do you see? And how do these get funded?
Yeah, I think, the most important thing for mountain lions in our state is that over the next century, we develop in a very different way than we developed in the previous century. If we continue to sprawl and, build homes where there's no homes right now, then we're going to lose these species and many others. If we instead, build more densely in areas that already have lots of housing and leave open space as open space, then I think we solve a number of problems. We help mitigate wildfire. We help mitigate climate change by having less vehicle miles traveled, and we save the wildlife that we have.
Yeah, awesome. So we'll take a few more questions, but we are getting close to the end here. This one we gotta ask. This is from Elton, who's 7 years old, and he asks if pumas kill other pumas.
Ooh, good question. They do actually. Many species of the cat family and actually bear family and other carnivores as well, males practice infanticide, where if you're a new male coming into an area, then your goal is to have your progeny, which brings your genes into the next generation. And so you're going to seek out all the kittens or cubs that are in that area and try to kill them. Now, the females don't like that, so they're going to try to avoid you and not let that happen. But if you're successful at killing a female's offspring, then what happens is that she comes back into estrus or back into heat and breeds with you. And then you get your progeny into the next generation instead of someone else's. Males will also kill other males if they're fighting over territory. And we see more male on male, or more mountain lions killing other mountain lions where mountain lions are really confined. So in the Santa Monica Mountains to the south of you guys, that's the sort of most confined population of mountain lions in California, where they're hemmed in by development in a relatively small area. That's where we see the most mountain lions killing other mountain lions. If you give them space to roam, set up home ranges and territories, you still see some of that, but much less.
Got it. I'm going to kind of combine these next two questions from Luke and Stephanie. Can you confirm, you showed a lot of males in your slides. Are you also tracking females? And from Stephanie, do you think that the collars affect sexual reproduction at all?
Yeah, another great question. Yeah, we track both males and females, probably about 50-50. I'd have to count to be sure, but my guess is about 50-50. And then, so, we're always super concerned for the welfare of these animals. We don't want the collar to, impact their ability to hunt or breed or move or really do anything any differently. And so, we make sure to fit them appropriately and keep them below, certain weight relative to body size, and we haven't seen any evidence that it impacts their breeding or anything.
That's great. Okay, so these ones are from Beverly and Rachel. California has now banned second generation rodenticide. Is that band having a positive effect on wildlife that we're seeing so far? And then animals that have mange, are they able to recover on their own, or do they usually lead to death if they're left untreated?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't think I have any satisfactory answers. I'm not sure whether the ban of second generation rodenticides has improved the plight of these animals. Certainly, we're still seeing this because I think those rodenticides are still used, even just that has to be by a professional applicator, and then the first generation rodenticides appear to cause problems as well. So I think the rodenticide story is not over, although I don't have the details at my fingertips. And then what was the second part of that question?
Do animals who have mange, are they able to recover on their own, or does it always lead to death if untreated?
Yeah, good question. I think it depends on the underlying condition of the animal. If the animal's in pretty good condition, then they can come back and recover. But if they're not, then they're gonna die. So yeah, it sort of depends.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. All right, we have a few more. Can we keep going, Chris?
Sure.
Okay. Is there any data about mountain lions preying on dogs?
So yeah, I mean, we've got data on mountain lions preying on dogs, and in our study, I think of many hundreds, possibly 1,000 kills. I'm not sure we've had one dog incident yet. That's not to say mountain lions won't kill dogs, but it's a fairly rare event. If you've got a house cat and you're worried, bring it in at night. Like, they definitely kill house cats, and particularly if you live sort of at the edge of town next to open space, particularly in a forested environment, your cat is definitely vulnerable. But dogs, and I'm not sure why. I mean, a little dog is just as vulnerable as a house cat, obviously. I think dogs like to sleep with their owners at night, right? And mountain lions do most of their hunting at night. So I think a lot of that is behavioral, and that cats are out doing their thing at night, and dogs are in their little dog pillow bed, snuggled up to their owner.
That's true. I never thought about that, but that totally makes sense. Okay, what do you do if you see a mountain lion, or it's like comes to your backyard? Who do you call?
There's no real need to call anybody. I would just snap some pictures, enjoy the experience, make sure that you're, on the other side of the glass. What you're seeing is something relatively common. I mean, I guess if you live in a downtown urban area, then you could call your, local police department. But if you're anywhere near natural vegetation, what you're seeing is not so unusual, and just enjoy it.
Got it. Okay.
I get hundreds of video camera footage a year from just people emailing me, hey, look at what my security camera caught. Mountain lions walking by people's little door camera.
Yeah. Okay, back to their collars. How long does the battery last before it dies, or you have to change it?
Yeah, great question. That all depends on what your research questions are, and so how big your battery is, and how much data you're sampling from. So, you could run it so that it takes a GPS location every second, you know, like every micro place that animal's been, and the collar would probably last a couple months. Or you can, you know, take a location every few hours, and, you know, you can get 2 or 3 years out of a collar. So, you know, it really depends on how you're sampling it. At our sampling rates, our collars usually last about 1.5 years.
That's a really long time. Okay, we're almost there. How long do mountain lion cubs stay with their mothers?
About 18 months, give or take.
Awesome. We'll do like rapid fire on these ones.
Okay.
Is there any contact between pumas and homeless camps?
Not that's been notable. You know, I'd imagine that homeless camps, to the extent that they're, you know, in parks or open space, would overlap with where mountain lions are. But, you know, mountain lions, they fear us, right? So they tend to stay away. If there's people talking at night or something like that, mountain lions are gonna, you know, probably stay away from those areas. So not that I've heard.
Got it. This one's a good one. In San Mateo and Belmont area, there are many deer. We're wondering if the high number of the population of deer is because there isn't a corridor for mountain lions to come in and get them easily.
Yeah, good question. So deer populations are like, you know, roughly influenced by 2 things. One is like how much food is there, and 2 is how much predation is there. So, you know, often in these suburban areas, you're increasing the amount of food because people are watering their landscapes, but you're also decreasing the amount of predation because you're making it harder for mountain lions to get in there. And so it's probably, you know, both factors are going on. There's more food, and deer do use these areas closer to people as what we'd call like a human shield effect, where they're using us as a shield from predation.
Okay. All right, 2 more. David asks, he's heard a story about a male who passed through many states. Do you know if that's true? Can mountain lions go through many states?
Yeah, there was famously a mountain lion that went from South Dakota to Connecticut. And that's the sort of longest dispersal we know of. So males in particular, females a little bit, but mostly males will move relatively large distances to find a new home range. And if you know, there's mountain lions everywhere, then they might go, you know, 20 miles over here and set up a home range, or 100 miles over there. But if they go over here and there's no mountain lions, well, then they'll just keep going because they think there's going to be mountain lions over there. But if they keep going and going and going, there's no mountain lions, they'll just keep going. And South Dakota is the, you know, easternmost mountain lion population in the US. We forget about the very southern tip of Florida. So, you know, that mountain lion was going east and didn't find any mountain lions. So it just kept going east and east and east until it finally got run over by a car on the highway in Connecticut.
Geez, I'm sure that's probably the story that he heard. So, all right, this is our last one. What attracts, besides, you know, the obvious fragmentation, brings mountain lions into cities? Is there any reason why they would go into a city?
So, you know, we have mountain lions that sort of, you know, so I think the way to think about mountain lions is there's kind of two behavior types. There's older adults that have, you know, home ranges that they're very familiar with. And those animals, if their home range borders a city, they might venture a few hundred meters into that city, especially if there's like kind of trees or parkland there, like that image I showed you of mountain lions. And they'll pick off raccoons or deer that are in that environment. They won't come there very often, but they'll come in there occasionally to check things out. But they're not going sort of deep in. And then the other kind of mountain lions are young mountain lions that are dispersing, and they're totally unfamiliar with the landscape. And so they're just trying to find a new range. And they get into an urban area and they say, okay, well, I need to get on the other side of that. And they keep going. They don't know where they're going because it's the first time they've ever been there. And those are the animals that are usually, you know, relocated by now, you know, wildlife officials.
Got it. So they need some help.
But they're not really attracted to the urban areas. They're just more like making a mistake.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for this. This is awesome. So I'll just say thank you, Chris, and all of you for joining us tonight. We will see you on June 14th for our next Science Pub from Home, investigating late 19th century investigators with Museum Curator of Anthropology, John R. Johnson, Ph.D. Until then, take care, and we hope to see you around the museum and Sea Center.
Great,
Good night,
thanks, Tristan.
everybody. Thank you, Chris.